There are no shortage of blockbuster trades in Major League Baseball, and for today's video, we are just going to grade some of the biggest MLB trades that have happened since the year 2020. Now, when I say the biggest trades, I'm not going to be talking about a player that is really big today, but really wasn't a notable name to the national audience when they were traded, so we won't mention when Junior Caminario was traded from the Cleveland Guardians to the Tampa Bay Rays, or even when somebody like Cole Reagans was traded from the Texas Rangers to the Kansas City Royals. They had to have been a household name when they were traded. And yeah, you guys can let me know in the comments if you want to see a different version of that. Some of the best trades that have happened where they haven't really been a notable name at the time they were traded, but those trades look a lot better in hindsight now. We're going to start off with one of the biggest trades that we're going to talk about in this video. He's actually going to be mentioned twice in this video. We're going to talk about the first time he got traded, and that was when Juan Soto got traded from the Washington Nationals to the San Diego Padres at the 2022 trade deadline. Soto turned down a $400 million extension from Washington, and they had basically 2 years of control left with him, and it would just be wise for them to capitalize on a historic haul. And at the time, the San Diego Padres had one of the best farm systems, and they loaded up the Brinks truck to go out and get Juan Soto. They traded away Robert Hassell, who was one of the top prospects at the time, Harlan Susana, CJ Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, Luke Voigt, and James Wood in exchange for Juan Soto and Josh Bell. And I'm going to start this off by giving the Washington Nationals an A and the San Diego Padres a B. We'll talk about the Nationals first, and it is funny to look back on this trade because some of the premier assets coming back were Robert Hassell, Abrams, and Mackenzie Gore, and then it was kind of like a flyer lottery ticket on James Wood, who was rising up prospect list leading up to the trade. And it's funny that he's turned out to be the best player from this trade. He's one of the best young assets in the league, and the Nationals have years of control for somebody that hit 9 home runs in 79 games last year, and he's off to an electric start in 2025, an 899 OPS, 11 home runs in his first 43 games, and is still just 22 years old. CJ Abrams was a top prospect at the time, and he has had an up and down start to his Nationals career and in Major League Baseball. Last year, he was having a productive year, 20 home runs and 31 stolen bases after stealing 47 bags in 2023, but he did struggle to get on base. This year, he's off to a fantastic start, a 350 OBP to start off the 2025 season. Mackenzie Gore has also had a rocky start to his career, but he was one of the best left-handed pitching prospects we have seen in quite some time. He's off to a better start this year than he's had the last two. He's got a 3.59 ERA in 52 innings this year and has struck out 75 guys. Currently, when I'm recording this, that is leading MLB. He's striking out 12.8 batters per 9. And it is kind of funny that Robert Hassell was one of the top players coming back in that trade, and he hasn't played in the major leagues yet. He has not made it out of AAA, because for San Diego in 2022 at Fort Wayne in High A, he had an 846 OPS, but then that dropped to a 548 OPS in High A Wilmington after getting traded in that deal. Still just 23 years old. And Harlan Susana is also in Double A right now as a 21-year-old, but the Nationals found their foundation and their young core from this deal with Gore, Abrams, and the most prized asset, James Wood, for somebody that was probably going to lead them in free agency. We just saw the bidding war for Juan Soto in the offseason of 2025. The Nationals were probably never coming close to that price, so I think they aced that trade. It's an A. For the Padres, I'm going to give it a B. It also comes into a fact. It also helps them out that they were able to flip Juan Soto to the New York Yankees, a trade we'll get to later on in this video. Soto, out of the gate in San Diego, did struggle a little bit to Juan Soto standards, a 778 OPS in that 2022 season. And he also helped the Padres go to the NLCS when they lost to the Philadelphia Phillies in 2022. He was a lot better in the regular season of 2023, even though the Padres did not make the playoffs that year. Soto had a 5.3 B WAR in 162 games. He walked 132 times, so a typical Soto, 410 OBP and a 930 OPS, and then he was traded that following year. So we gave them good production over that year and a half, and they were able to get some assets for him, but you would have rather have had James Wood on your team right now than any of the assets you got in the Juan Soto Yankees trade, which we could just talk about that one right now. And honestly, I do think this is a win-win trade for both the New York Yankees and the San Diego Padres, so I'm going to give this an A to both teams. The trade involved Trent Grisham and Juan Soto going to the New York Yankees in exchange for Johnny Brito, Kyle Higashioka, Michael King, Drew Thorpe, and Randy Vasquez. We could start off with the New York Yankees side of things because Juan Soto is one of the best players in baseball in 2024. It ended up just being a one-year rental because the crosstown New York Mets ended up outbidding them in the offseason for him, but he put up a 7.9 B WAR, 128 runs, led Major League Baseball, a 989 OPS, 41 home runs, a career single season high for Juan Soto, and was protected very well in the lineup with Aaron Judge hitting around him, and he helped the Yankees go to the World Series. So I know it was just technically a one-year rental in hindsight, but the fact that he had that good of a year and brought them to the World Series, it is going to be an A for me. And Trent Grisham is actually on his way to being an all-star somehow in the year 2025. After really making a name for himself in Milwaukee, and he had a good year in 2020 in just 59 games, and his OPS continued to decline and was not a great player for the Yankees last year and was not even a starter. But this year, he's gotten 1,000 OPS through his first 35 games, which is kind of incredible. The best asset that the Padres got back in this deal was a reliever turned starter in Michael King, who started more games down the stretch of the 2023 season and really broke out as a full-time starter in 2024. A 4.1 WAR, a 2.95 ERA in 173 innings, and he's off to a great start in 2025 as well, and is going to get a nice payday from the Padres or a different team this upcoming offseason. Vasquez and Higashioka have given them some reps over the last few years as well. Vasquez is currently on the team. They were also able to use Drew Thorpe, the Yankees' top pitching prospect, to go out and get Dylan Cease as well. Let's talk about a trade that happened in the 2021 offseason, and in hindsight, this is one of the worst trades we have seen in the 2020s, and that was when the Colorado Rockies traded their franchise superstar Nolan Arenado to the St. Louis Cardinals for Mateo Gil, Tony Locey, Jake Sommers, Elias Montero, and Austin Gomber. Oh yeah, and the Cardinals also paid most of this contract down as well. It was just a horrible trade, so this is an easy A for the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's an easy F for the Colorado Rockies. Since joining St. Louis, Nolan Arenado has accumulated 18 WAR over the last 4 years and the start of 2025, including a 7.9 B-WAR season in 2022, his second year in St. Louis, 30 home runs, 103 RBIs, an 891 OPS, and finished third in MVP voting, multiple Gold Glove finishes in St. Louis, multiple All-Star appearances, had somewhat of a down 2024, but is off to a solid start here in 2025, and hasn't really looked like the same superstar he did for most of his time in Colorado, but man, for what they gave up, this was a phenomenal trade for the St. Louis Cardinals. As for the Colorado Rockies, maybe the best asset they got back was Austin Gomber, and he has not really pitched the best over in Colorado, and that is just the trend for every pitcher that comes through Colorado. A 4.53 ERA in 2021, a 5.56 ERA in 2022, a 5.5 ERA in 2023, and has a 4.75 ERA in 2024, and is currently on the 60-day IL, and this was a franchise superstar who they didn't want to continue to pay after giving him a massive extension that kicked in the 2020 season. Oh yeah, and then they just went out and paid Chris Bryant over $170 million to barely play for them. This is one of the worst trades of this century, maybe one of the worst and dumbest moves of all time in hindsight. Steve Cohen took over the Mets in the early 2020s, and he wanted to make a big splash right away. There was an elite shortstop over there in Cleveland, and there was reports that the Cleveland Guardians were not going to give him that $300 million extension he wanted, so the New York Mets went out and traded for Francisco Lindor, and also getting Carlos Carrasco in this deal in exchange for Isaiah Green, Josh Wolf, Andres Jimenez, and Ahmed Rosario. This trade is an easy A for the Mets, and I'm going to give it a C for the Cleveland Guardians. For the Mets side of things, honestly, Carlos Carrasco being a throw-in was very nice for the Mets, as he proved to be a good depth starter for the Mets in 2022 as a full-time starter, a 3.97 ERA, 15-7 record. He did struggle in 2023, but honestly, as a throw-in, gave them good innings in that 2022 season when the Mets made the playoffs. And obviously, Francisco Lindor is on a Hall of Fame track. He got off to a little bit of a rough start in his Mets days. He really did struggle with his batting average and his full-on power, but has gotten better and better over time. The home runs have gone up every year. The OPS has gone up every year, including a second place finish in NL MVP voting in 2024. Somehow has not been an all-star since being with the Mets, which just doesn't make any sense. But Lindor does get off to slower starts every year, but has had 3 straight top 10 MVP finishes, does not have a Gold Glove either, which also doesn't make any sense in my opinion, but he's off to his best start ever in a New York Met uniform throughout the first few months of a year. An 8.66 OPS, he's slugging 500 right now, a 3.66 OBP, 9 home runs, 26 RBIs, and has also been a 30-30 guy over the last 2 years as well. He's leading the NL in hits right now with 52. He plays elite defense, and like I said, is on pace to being a Hall of Famer one day. The prospects that came back from Cleveland never really panned out in the majors. Ahmed Rosario was an alright right contact bat. He batted around 280 for them, but never really got on base more than that. But I would say was a productive player in 2022. He had a 4.2 WAR for that team, and in 2023 was traded to the LA Dodgers for former Met Noah Syndergaard. So the most important name that came back in this deal for Cleveland had to be Andres Gimenez, who ended up getting a nice 7-year, $106 million extension from the Cleveland Guardians after having a 7.4 WAR season in 2022. And at this time, a lot of people were saying that the Cleveland Guardians won this trade. And at the time, maybe they weren't wrong, because Gimenez had an 837 OPS. As a 23-year-old, he played elite defense, 17 home runs, 20 stolen bases, and like I said, accumulated 7.4 WAR. He had 5 WAR in 2023, 4 WAR in 2024, but it's been more so of the glove than the bat. A 712 OPS in 2023, a 630 OPS in 2024, and got traded to the Toronto Blue Jays in that 2024 offseason. So Rosario gave them a little bit of production, Gimenez as well. So I'm not going to give it anything worse than a C, and it's a nice thing that they got out of that Gimenez contract last offseason. So I talked about the Nolan Arenado trade being one of the worst of all time. This one may top it, and it involves a big spending team and not a cheap team like the Rockies. It's going to be when the Boston Red Sox did not want to extend Mookie Betts, so they traded him to the LA Dodgers along with David Price to get off of that contract in exchange for Jeter Downs, Alex Verdugo, and Connor Juan. This is an easy A for the LA Dodgers. I'm actually going to give it my first A+ because he helped them win a ring, and I'm going to give an F to the Boston Red Sox for this deal. Mookie Betts is on his way to being a Hall of Famer one day, and he could have did it in Boston. He ended up having a 346 batting average in 2018, won MVP, and helped the Boston Red Sox win the World Series that year. And for some reason, they didn't want to pay him after 2019. He ended up accumulating 3.7 WAR in 2020 in a 55-game season for Betts. He had an 8.6 WAR season in 2023, finished runner-up to Ronald Acuna Jr. in MVP voting, and yeah, just had 39 home runs and 107 RBIs. He's going to get over an 800 OPS every single year. He could play outfield, he could play second, he could play short, and like I said, is going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. Jeter Downs never really did anything in the majors. You could say Connor Wong and his 2024 season was maybe the best value that they got in this deal, a 758 OPS, but yeah, pretty much a fluke in 2025, just a 385 OPS at the moment. And Alex Verdugo was a top prospect at one point in his career. He ended up spending a few years in Boston. He did have a productive 2020 season in the shortened season, multiple 280 average seasons, but never accumulated over an 800 OPS. Could have been a lot worse, but the fact that he was the big name coming back for Mookie Betts, one of the best players in baseball, was basically up there with Mike Trout as one of the best players in baseball. It's an F for the Boston Red Sox. This was a really random midseason trade, as the LA Dodgers were really going for it all in that 2021 season when they shocked everybody when they traded away Josiah Gray, Keibert Ruiz, some of the top prospects in their system, Donovan Casey, and Gerardo Carrillo for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. Max Scherzer was a free agent at the end of the year. Trey Turner was a free agent at the end of the 2022 season. We know that the Dodgers did not end up winning a World Series with them. They ended up losing to the Braves 4-2 in that NLCS in 2021, and in 2022 they lost in the divisional series to the San Diego Padres. So for the Dodgers, I'm going to give them a B- because Ruiz and Gray haven't really turned out to be blue chip prospects in Washington, and Trey Turner was a very good player in LA. 2.4 WAR in 52 games in 2021, 5.2 WAR in 2022, had an 809 OPS, and Max Scherzer had a 1.98 ERA in 11 games with the LA Dodgers in 2021. They weren't the reasons why they ended up losing in the postseason, but the fact that they weren't long-term assets, I really can't give them much better grades than that. Josiah Gray right now is currently on the 60-day IL. He did have his moments in 2023, finishing that season with a 3.91 ERA after struggling in 2022, but he hasn't really been healthy since then. And Keibert Ruiz is off to a good start here in 2025. He did get a pre-arb extension through 2030 by the Washington Nationals, but he definitely doesn't look like that top prospect that he once was for the LA Dodgers before this trade. So for Washington, I'm just going to give them a C+, just because they probably were never going to pay Trey Turner or Max Scherzer either. The Atlanta Braves decided not to pay their franchise legend Freddie Freeman in the offseason of 2022, so they pivoted to the Oakland A's fire sale, and they traded for their power hitting first baseman Matt Olson in exchange for Christian Pache, Ryan Q Cusick, Joey Estes, and Shea Langoliers. For the Atlanta Braves, I'm going to give them an A for this trade. This was a phenomenal deal. The A's never wanted to give Matt Olson a long-term extension just because they're pretty cheap as a franchise. We know that. And the Atlanta Braves traded for the Atlanta native and gave him an 8-year, $168 million contract. And usually some guys in their first year takes a little bit of time to adapt. And Olson in 2022 had a 3.3 WAR. He had a 4.77 slugging and 802 OPS. He had 34 home runs and 103 RBIs, but he really showed out in 2023 for the Braves. All 162 games for the second straight year in Atlanta. He did it again in 2024, but back to 2023, he had 54 home runs and 139 RBIs. He led the NL in home runs, RBIs, and slugging percentage, and I still can't believe that they got him for as little as they did. He finished 4th in MVP voting that year. He has gone down a little bit since then and has just a 744 OPS here in 2025, but honestly, I do feel like I have to give this an A for the Atlanta Braves just because a lot of the guys did not pan out in Oakland, including Christian Pache, who was one of their top prospects at the time. But Shea Langoliers is making a little bit of a name for himself right now. He was a first-round pick out of Baylor in the 2019 draft by the Braves and was one of their top prospects as well. Took a little bit of time for him to get going, but he's having his best season so far here in 2025, where he's got a 783 OPS through his first 36 games as their long-term catcher. And he did hit 29 home runs last year, so if he could be a little bit more consistent going forward, I can give them a little bit better of a grade than what I have right now at a B-. But if Langoliers did not pan out, this could have been an F. And the last trade that I want to talk about is when the San Diego Padres acquired Blake Snell from the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for Blake Hunt, Cole Wilcox, Francisco Mejia, and Luis Patino. Yeah, for the Tampa Bay Rays, I'm going to give them a D in this return. And for the San Diego Padres, I will give them an A, as Snell did end up winning a Cy Young in one of his 3 years in San Diego in that 2023 season. He helped them go to the NLCS there in 2022 with Juan Soto, and his ERAs in San Diego, a 4.2 in 2021, a 3.38 in 2022, and a 2.25 in 2023. They did not give him a long-term extension, but looking back at what they gave up, I think that was more than enough for Blake Snell. And yeah, the Rays did not capitalize on their return for Snell. So yeah, that is going to be it for me. There's definitely some other trades that are happening that are just as big, like Tyler Glasnow to the Dodgers, or maybe Dylan Cease to the San Diego Padres, but I think it's still TBD on to see if some of these prospects work out for how much they were traded for at the time. And like I said, if you guys want to see a different video where I talk about some of the bigger trades just because of their big names right now, but maybe they weren't big names when they got traded, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the grades that I gave out. Drop a thumbs up if you guys did enjoy the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.